So today is June 1st. And according to our schedule for ordained, we change to summer robes. And of course, today is one of the coldest days of spring. And on October 1st, when we change to winter robes, it will be hot. But, you know, the observation of schedule, tradition, regulations is, in its own way, so freeing. I don't feel like wearing this robe today because, you know, it's really cold. I think I'll put my wool robe on. No. It's not a matter of what I feel like. It's not a matter of preference, in other words. We're held by these regulations. True freedom is within these forms. And of course, we chant in the Heart Sutra, right? What do we say about form and shunyata?
They're one.
They are one. They are exactly. There is not even a hair's breadth between them. And of course, we feel that when we are in samadhi. Form is exactly shunyata, shunyata, exactly form. Feeling, thought, volition, all of this is free. We are not constrained by form or regulations. We are free within them. However, you know, I came up in an era of disdain for conventional morality. Some of you may have experienced some of that as well. Anybody?
Right.
Yeah. Throwing off anything that was felt to be restraining or constraining. Societal rules were meant to be what? Broken. And I was of a generation like Jikyo's, and I'm only talking about America right now, not Japan, so I won't include Myoku, who's in same general age group, but I was shaped by the Beat era. It was before hippiedom. The surrealists in poetry and literature. It was an era when traditional mores were mocked. What sorts of mores? Chastity, success in one's profession, social climbing,
Any kind of conformity.
any kind of conformity, corporate success, right?
Absolutely.
Who needs it? And of course, in the second half of the 60s, so I have to say, as you know, some of you, I'm going to my 60th reunion at Vassar. I was there from 61 to 65. And it was still a very rigid, uptight atmosphere, which I did my best to destroy. So it'll be really interesting going back to be with these women my age who were still the product of certain kind of complacent attitude toward how people were supposed to be. Debutantes. There were a lot of debutantes. And you went to Vassar in order to marry a man from Yale or Princeton. It wasn't how I saw the world.
Needless to say.
No, we really formed in the second part of my time there. There were a few of us who were pretty revolutionary and were engaged in freedom rides and other kinds of civil rights and anti-war activity. And I was the editor of the newspaper and published the first wedding announcement of a Vassar girl who married a black man. I got a lot of flack about putting that in the paper. But by the time I got out of college, things were changing everywhere. There was this great counterculture. It was called the youthquake by the media. The post-war baby boomers were latching on to us. The hippies. So there was this sense that we had of the hypocrisy of societal norms. You know, what was beneath the surface? Everybody looked good, but there was a lot of ignoring of suffering, even among those who were having a look-good family life, but especially of those deemed inferior because of their race, because they were living in poverty, or whatever the reasons. Immigrants. There's a wonderful feeling of artistic foment during those years. And the 60s were, in a way, like a renewal of the Roaring Twenties. Some of you know about the Roaring Twenties, yes? There's so many interesting things going on back then. And I was fortunate enough to have found mentors in Norma Millay and Charles Ellis. I painted with Charlie, but Norma was the sister of Edna St. Vincent Millay and very much a product of that era. And they had such great stories to tell about the Provincetown Players and all of the wonderful poetry and writing that was going on then. So all the scene that I was growing up in was that of abstract expressionism, in which form was definitely seen as something to bomb, let's say. And jazz, the free form, the liberties that were taken with the melody and returned to and challenged over and over again. You've heard of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So the feeling of, really, what is love? Let's explore what is free in love. How do we break that conventional way of seeing another human being down and see what we could find in a true union? Monogamy was, of course, quite threatened. The drugs were psychedelic, mostly. It was before people became so addicted to opiates. And the music, the sense of challenging authority and looking at what was going on and really seeing behind the scenes. So we had Dylan, the times
Are changing.
We are changing.
the times they are changing. We had Donovan. I loved him. Yeah. I'll pick up your hand and slowly blow your little mind.
We'll find a beach.
Blowing your little mind. That little mind needed to be blown. So there were liberation movements that came out of this era, or that were really beginning to have effect. The civil rights movement I spoke of, gay rights, feminism, and the anti-war movement. All kinds of political demonstrations were taking place. Civil disobedience, experimental relationships. Do you remember Be-Ins?
Mm-hmm.
Central Park Be-In. The personal is political was one of the slogans that came out of the feminist movement. You can't talk about what's going on as though it's outside of our own experience. And our own lived experience has to inform how we engage with others. So to look at something like racism and see it, and see what really has been the case for all these years. The Civil War, you can tell right now today, it never ended. To realize, wow, this a famous song, "This land is your land, this land is my land." Well, talk to the indigenous people about that. It seemed like it was speaking about a shared understanding, but was it really? So many truths were conveniently ignored. The personal. I grew up in a family in which art, music, literature, philosophy were treasured and examined and experienced. My mother and stepfather, she married when I was 4 because my father had been killed in the war. They decided that they had to leave the Jewish ghetto, that's what they called it, Jewish ghetto of Brooklyn, leave it behind, disrupting my life considerably, since all of my treasures in the family were there. We went to New Mexico, and then we settled in rural New Jersey, beautiful part of Hunterdon County, not far from New Hope, Pennsylvania, who had his studio there? Nakashima. So we got to visit with them while I was growing up. And my parents left all of what they called that superstitious religious engagement behind. They were, without calling themselves that, secular humanists. But I, from a very, very early age, had this strong, mystical feeling, sensation of something more than what could be seen. And of course, my parents were leaving behind the conventional practice of Judaism when they left Brooklyn. But anti-Semitism was a constant undercurrent wherever we went. And it was often not so hidden. My biological father was named Leonard Cohen. And he and my mother, before I was born, decided to change their last name so that I would have a better chance at avoiding being identified as a Jew. So he changed his last name to Leonard Corlin, going against something so, now I feel this way, so valuable. Cohen, or Kohen, means priest, the highest level in Judaism. So when I go to temple and we have the time of each person going up to where the Torah is being read, as a Kohen, I am invited to come up first, and then others. Doesn't happen every time, but frequently enough. But I wasn't raised to understand how precious that was. And certainly it was clear to me that just changing one's name didn't necessarily prevent one from being considered inferior, weird, not part of society as a whole. There was a lot of kind of just an ordinary feeling that you got that people felt Jews were not wanted. And actually, you live in Cazenovia. And did you know that Jews were not allowed to purchase land in Cazenovia? That's only changed recently. Country clubs, all kinds of exclusion. So there we were, living in the country, and I think some of you, I told this story. My best friend, Eileen, we went to a two-room red schoolhouse. She was very much Catholic and wanted to become a nun, and we adored each other. And one day she came in and said, she had great news for me. Her mother told her that I couldn't be Jewish because I didn't have horns.
What?
Yeah. So often people ask me, what brought you to Zen? And I don't give them this whole long thing. It's really easy to compress into one word. Probably many of you know that word in your own lives.
Suffering.
Yeah, dukkha, misery. In a word, one word. Misery and pain and violence, in my case. No one thought of it as abuse back then. Nowadays, oh my God, call the whatever, hotline or something. Get social workers involved. Disobedient children were hit. But I never really saw it coming. It wasn't straightforward. It was the product of some very difficult psychological condition. I followed the rules. I tried to figure out what I was supposed to do and not do. But as that wonderful Leonard Cohen song goes, I led in my secret life. I had a very strong secret life. And it was also unpredictable why my stepfather would become furious at me. I really didn't know. And at this point in my life, I'm going to be 82 this year, I don't really remember any specific incidents, just general fear and anger. And one day, getting back to this question, one day, I was maybe 8 or 9, I was just seething with rage and confusion and grief. And really, I don't know why or how, but I found myself sitting under a tree. And this tree, I can't tell you what kind of tree it was. but it was everything that my grandmother represented: loving kindness and strength and solidity and such a beautiful feeling of a kind of embrace of all the life forms, the birds, the little ants, and me. And I sat there. My hands came together. I don't know why or how, but they just did. And I could feel that the stillness. My hands radiated or just became as vast as no words for it. And in that stillness, the suffocating emotions fell away. I could hear the birds, the trucks on Route 22, the smell of the grass. And it was something that came to me. It wasn't something I learned from someone, but I already knew it. And that was what I think we, each of us, in some way feel. That was something that made it so much a truth for me that I could do this no matter what, wherever I was. Of course, a tree is nice, but not necessary. And so I continued. When things were really bad, just sit down, be absolutely still. And as I've told you, it wasn't until 8th grade that this became known to me as Zen, because we had a wonderful world textbook, world culture. Oh, got to the passage on Japan. It has a name. Oh, yeah. And so, of course, as I learned more, I was so taken with the emphasis that Zen stories were imbued with, the emphasis on breaking through conventional thinking. And I read Alan Watts' The Way of Zen, and Jack Kerouac, On the Road, Dharma Bums, and Herrigel, Zen in the Art of Archery. Get rid of the idea of hitting the target, especially the bullseye. It's not about that. Experience what it is to become the arrow. And Nyogen Senzaki, 101 Stories in Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. I felt so drawn to this way of life, this way of overturning what felt so stale in the social atmosphere around me. Blow your little mind. Enter into the vastness of words come in like one mind, but they're just words until you experience it. This adventurous spirit. In my secret life, I felt this natural trust. Beyond language. And there was also the refrain of that wonderful French singer, Edith Piaf. Non, je ne regrette rien. I regret nothing. She sang this, and I felt that it resonated. I have to follow this path that has never been before. And yet, underneath all that experimentation, all those unconventional relationships, I began to realize that perhaps it wasn't quite true that I regretted nothing. As an adventurer, there were mishaps. You cannot be an adventurer in relationships without hurting others. Have you noticed that? And the more my Zen practice deepened, the more regret I felt. And this regret, this feeling of regret or remorse is really important for us. Not to shy away from, but to dig into, to investigate fully, and to give us the motivation that's needed to clarify, to purify, to break free rather than breaking through alone. To find that freedom in which there is real integrity, real respect, real union. You know, Genpo Roshi, who was Soen Roshi's teacher, he was nearly blind. He had a very difficult life. Before he died, he taught his students, the two most important things are insight and virtue. There is so much I want to say about this and about what we're reading in the Shurangama Sutra these days, and what has recently been discovered in Dogen's writings at the end of his life, beyond or in addition to his most well-known work, the Shobo Genzo, the 12 fascicles. And because of the era now in which we are living, in which there is so much deceit, so little value of life, so much corruption, I don't need to tell you. I really want to go into all of this in more depth, so we have an opportunity in 2 weeks. I would like to return to or investigate more fully this topic of what we might say is beyond conventional notions of morality, and at the same time truly honors authentic ethical behavior. So after I come back from reunion, I'm sure I'll have a few stories to tell you, but I really do want to get into this topic more fully. So until then.